Good afternoon and welcome. This conference has been absolutely inspiring. The keynotes, the breakout sessions, and most importantly, you are engaged attendees. To wrap up the conference, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our closing keynote speaker, Dr. Niki Elliot. Dr. Elliot serves as director for the Center of Embodied, Equity, and Neurodiversity at University of San Diego's School of Leadership and Educational Service Sciences. Excuse me. In this role, she leads the development of research projects and professional certificates for PK to 12 educators, school counselors, and college faculty. Prior to this appointment, she served for 7 years as the founding director of the Center for Neurodiversity, Learning, and Wellness at the University of Laverne. She is a high energy, spirited, and inspiring teacher educator and has taught students of all ages for over 30 years. Dr. Elliot is a staunch advocate for students whose lived experiences include learning disabilities, mental health diagnoses, foster care placement, and/or racialized marginalization. Her mission is to galvanize an education workforce that establishes trauma-informed, neuro-inclusive learning communities where all students and educators thrive. We are so honored and privileged to have Dr. Niki Elliot with us today. Dr. Elliot?
Thank you so much, Danny, for that awesome introduction. Sometimes I will hear people speak about me. I'm like, who are they talking about? But it is my absolute pleasure to be in community with my tribe. I want to thank SIP and all the people who have coordinated this conference. It is definitely something that I wish I had available to me when I was a classroom teacher 30 years ago. And it's an honor if any one thing that we share together in community today can transform the way you show up for children, particularly those who have learning disabilities and other diagnoses that require exceptional support and care on our part. Today, I'd like to share this closing keynote with you. I'm really interested in this message about the mind-body connection as it relates to understanding what children need regarding neuro-inclusive behavior support. So many times when I'm working with teachers in my role as a teacher educator, what tricks can you give me for helping a student? What strategies can, quote unquote, fix this child? And I like to flip the narrative on that and really ask us to turn that question around and put a mirror to our face and ask, what can I change to support pro-social behavior and effective and comfortable social engagement for children of all neurotypes? And the reason this question and this willingness to turn the lens back on myself became so important to me is because of my own lived experience. And so before we dive in very briefly, I'd just like to share with you my why in all of this work around inclusion. I'm a 30-year veteran educator, started as a 4th and 5th grade teacher in Teaneck, New Jersey, went on to become a teacher coach and consultant and helped build some charter schools to support neurodivergent children. And at a certain point, after my first husband and I delivered 2 beautiful, healthy daughters, we decided we wanted to open our home and adopt a boy. And this beautiful young man that you see here with me is our son, Chaz, that we adopted from foster care. And at the time, we were told not to expect him to be able to read, and a long other list of things we were told he would never be able to do due to prenatal drug exposure and a diagnosis of intellectual disability and emotional disturbance. And the reason that I am holding this picture up for you today is because this picture is Chaz at his 13th birthday party. And he's holding his birthday card because it was the very first time he was ever able to read a birthday card on his own. This past year, at the age of 17, he's currently 18, but last summer at the age of 17 was the first time Chaz was able to enjoy participating and being included in a summer camp. And if you are not the parent of a neurodivergent child with exceptional nervous system behavior, or nervous system regulation challenges, then you have no idea what it's like to raise a child who is consistently excluded from Boys and Girls Club, from summer camps, from Sunday school, from sports programs, after school programs, on the own school site, any place where a child with exceptional diagnoses are not being supported by a trained special education teacher and trained aides, which is a very limited space within our society. And families like ours become invisible in the larger social sphere when our needs for our children are not included, and when people can get away with saying, sorry, we were never quote unquote trained to deal with a child like yours. And so my keynote today is to just give you a little bit of an insight of the work that grew out of our family's lived experience and the merger of my professional knowledge and background. Because our goal is to eliminate that excuse for caregivers, for providers, for professionals. And if we do our job right, as I'm sure all of my colleagues have delivered outstanding advice and guidance and support throughout this virtual conference, that you will walk away with the skills to be able to include children like Chaz so that they can grow into their genius and into the healing power of community when you choose to elevate your capacity. And so to respond to this need that so many parents like mine have faced and are continuing to face, I designed a program called Heart-Centered Connections. And currently it is delivered as a continuing education certificate program for professionals and caregivers. And our goal is really about building neuro-inclusive environments that are rooted, again, in awareness, compassion, and felt safety. And my concern is not only for children who have neurodivergent diagnosis, whether that be ADHD, autism, dyslexia, intellectual disabilities like my son, emotional disturbance, but also children whose nervous system and brains are impacted by the effects of trauma, which we know can also produce the kind of symptomology in brain and nervous system development that can look like a learning disability. So our goal is to build a program, has been to build a program that supports not only K-12 schools, but also we have the great privilege of partnering through the University of San Diego with the San Diego Foundation to train people who work at the Boys and Girls Club, at the YMCA, at the local museum education centers where many children are not able to participate in the kind of STEM and robotics camps that every child should be able to enjoy. So it is a great pleasure to be fulfilling this promise. It wasn't in time for my son's childhood, but it is in time for the children who are able to benefit from the leaders who stepped up for this training. So I'm very excited about that. So in this work, we have 7 pillars in the Heart-Centered Connections program. And so what we mean by that is 7 skills that we believe every adult service provider or caregiver should have in order to qualify ourselves to hold the hearts of children, especially those with exceptional needs. So these 7 pillars include self-awareness, interpersonal awareness, the ability to build neuro-inclusive spaces, an understanding of how to activate the genius of the neurodivergent mind, how to engage learning in ways that support not only neurotypical learners, but the full range of neurodiverse learners, the ways to settle the heart and nervous system through mindful communication, as well as heart-centered repair. So we say these 7 skills that if every adult who touches the life of a child had these 7 skills, we could capture back and create a wider net of inclusion for children with diagnoses and exceptional needs. So today, for our purpose, because this is a 36-hour program, what I really want to share with you all today are the 3 foundational pillars. We're just going to touch on them so that you can understand what I believe are the 3 most important things that you should attend to if your goal is to support pro-social behavior from a neuro-inclusive perspective. First, we'll talk about building adult nervous system capacity. Then we'll dive into how to support regulation, co-regulation for neurodiverse learners. And then we'll end with a brief review of establishing sensory-friendly environments. Now, it's important for me to help you understand that my approach to understanding the needs of neurodiverse learners as it relates to behavior and learning follows pretty much Bruce Perry's neurosequential model, just understanding that we have to work from the bottom up because most of us are approaching children's behaviors from a cognitive perspective. I see, and I do respect cognitive behavior therapy and so many other forms of treatment that have helped so many. But what I have found to have a strong impact, both for adults who provide services, as well as for the children to receive it, is to understand this from a bottom-up perspective. So we anchor into applied educational neuroscience, and we take the perspective that accessing the mechanisms for children's behaviors is not in the cognition, it's in the physiology first. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So what I ask teachers to do, and caregivers of all types, is to learn to see children and to teach children with the brain and nervous system in mind. So we're understanding this reticular activating system. I'll go very briefly. It's called the attention filter. That's the nickname that we give it. And when we tell a child, pay attention, we think that there's some, we opened up the brain with the cranial can opener and poured in our instructions, and it told the mouth what to say, and it told the child's hands and feet what to do. But in my understanding of applied educational neuroscience, we understand that from the bottom up, the reticular activating system's job is not to prioritize our instructions. It's not to prioritize our concerns about reading and writing and arithmetic. The reticular activating system's job is to focus on filtering and prioritizing, paying attention to signals around safety and reproduction. Now, in the classroom, there's no reproduction happening. So we would say in the teaching that I follow from Judy Willis from UCSB, who was a great mentor in my understanding of this, is that we provide novelty. So novelty satisfies that need for reproduction. Who's the prettiest, the most unique, the most curious thing? So that's the way we design our instruction. But before we get to that, we have to settle the nervous system by providing both physical and psychological safety. And that depends on this first pillar. Our adult nervous system capacity is the foundation of the creation of psychological and physical states of safety for children. And so what we understand in the Heart-Centered Connections model is that children's pro-social behavior and engagement rest completely on the foundation of adult nervous system capacity. So our nervous systems are scanning the environment at all times. Again, in that attempt to assure our safety, is asking 3 foundational questions. In this environment, am I safe? Again, both physical and psychological. Do they like me? Am I respected here? And for many teachers, we get triggered when we feel a sense of disrespect coming toward us from the behaviors that we're observing for children. And we're at risk of being triggered ourselves into some of the very behaviors that we judge children for. And the third question that is pretty much driving our nervous system state is, am I good enough to belong here? Now, while this is a question that does press many of our neurodivergent learners, educators as well, when we show up with a lesson we've planned or an activity and it doesn't land the way we want, or the children don't behave the way we expect, that's pumping up against our question, am I good enough? Do I deserve this job? And that triggers us and is oftentimes a kind of a precursor to the ways in which we relate and react, not even relate, that we react to children's behaviors in ways that co-escalate rather than co-regulate the environment. So in my work, I'm always asking adults to become more aware. So we say in this work, mindfulness simply equals awareness. Awareness of what my own nervous system stressors are and what my own nervous system soothers are. And then to build the skills that we need as adults to be able to manage our nervous system states when we're working with children who don't have that kind of capacity. Another thing that I've learned in this work, after working with thousands of teachers across the state and now across the world, around the world, is that many adults who are working with children are themselves neurodivergent, undiagnosed and untreated and unaware. So they themselves are unaware of the ways in which their own nervous system sensitivities, their own triggers and low vagal tone impact the amount of capacity they have to sit with children when the child's behavior is struggling. Simultaneously, I've also learned in this work, after almost 30 years of this work, that many teachers have higher ACE scores. So if those of you familiar with ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study calculates the number of exposures to trauma that a person has experienced between 0 and 18. And it is not uncommon in any group of teachers that I'm training to come across teachers who have ACE scores of 4, of 5, even 9 and 10, which means that without awareness of our own nervous system states, we can become educators who are more triggered to have higher exposure discipline rates, less capacity to manage stress from children, and that impacts our burnout scores as well as the work we do with children. So ideally, what I'm asking teachers to do when I'm sharing this chart with them is to notice that when that answer is yes, I feel safe, I feel respected, I feel good enough to belong, we can show up with the physical and emotional characteristics that you see in this green zone of the chart. That's that safe and socially engaged state of the nervous system. But when that answer is no, I don't feel safe, I don't feel respected, I don't feel good enough to belong, we can be bounced out into any one of these survival states you see. Mobilized, that would be those of us who tend to default into fight or flight types of behaviors. That could lead a lot of aggression in our ways that we connect with children, that can escalate behaviors. Some of us may have grown up having to appease to get along. And for those, I see people have very shaky, loose boundaries with children, and it's hard to maintain and enforce the boundaries and the agreements that need to be held in a space because they're caught up in needing to be liked by the children. And then we see others go into shutdown, and that's where you might see some of your teachers in quiet quitting mode, where we're physically there, but checked out with a sense of hopelessness or withdrawal. And so our work as the first step of supporting children's behavior from a mind-body perspective is to support the adult nervous system in being able to have what I call greater bounce back ability. So that when we're bounced out and we find ourselves being activated and mobilized or shut down states, that we have the tools that can help us bounce back and reset to that green zone of safety and social engagement. Because the research consistently is showing us that it's only when we as adults are anchoring the physiology of connection that we're able to provide the kind of co-regulation that children need, especially our children who are most challenged with fragile, or not fragile, but sensitive, highly sensitive nervous systems. That's a better way to say it. So in our work, we are always working with teachers as well as with children to help understand how we increase the capacity of the vagus nerve. So many of you may have heard of the vagus nerve, but I know many haven't necessarily seen an image of it. And this yellow bundle of nerves is connected to is the seat of our parasympathetic nervous system, the major component of it. And you see it is thoroughly connected to our digestion, our colon, intestines, and it is the communication highway from the brain to the body, from the body to the brain, excuse me. And all of our mindfulness practices, all of the mind-body practices that we teach in our schools, end goal for that is to increase vagal tone, is what we call it. So a strong vagus nerve can help reset all these organs you see it touching, helping us return to a settled state. It creates the conditions for the body to heal physically. It creates the conditions for the heart to bond and trust, which is where we get our pro-social engagement and connection with others. It boosts oxytocin for the empathy and compassion. And an active and connected and strong vagus nerve gives us access to these learning centers of the brain. And so this is why the body is first. And so many times when I'm working with schools, I have seen teachers press play on an app for children to engage in a mindfulness practice, or for children to do a breathwork practice, while the teacher themselves is off to the side, taking attendance or checking a voice email, as if the mind-body connection only matters for the children and is not applicable to them. But in this work, we find that helping teachers is critical in this regard of building something that we refer to as high vagal tone. So our work as a first step of supporting children's behaviors for you as an adult to understand the things that help you connect with the healing power of the vagus nerve, to build a more flexible nervous system that can recover more quickly from the stress that you encounter, particularly in working with children with high needs, and to engage with them with a higher window of tolerance. So in our work, we created a research project for people who are in the Heart-Centered Connections program. We're piloting a research project where we're using polar H10 devices to measure heart rate variability. So it's the way we can track the state of the vagus nerve objectively. Many of you might have Fitbits or other devices that you use to track heart rate variability. But when you engage in practices that increase your heart rate variability, blood pressure goes down, vagal tone increases, your bounce back ability increases, and your window of tolerance, your nervous system capacity for serving our most vulnerable children increases tremendously. And the same thing that might have been a behavior that would have stressed you to a point where you would have kicked a child out of class or put a child in a position of some kind of isolating punishment, you find the need doesn't even arise in the same way. And so it's very powerful that we're looking at this work. So not only through breath work practices, but also through something called the Safe and Sound Protocol, we're also exploring ways to have teachers using music. So the Safe and Sound Protocol uses engineered music to help strengthen the nervous system and increase adult nervous system capacity. This is also a protocol that you might be interested in researching and looking into to support children in your life too. The Safe and Sound Protocol is definitely also used for children on the spectrum and children who have other needs that are connected to the nervous system. So what we're helping adults understand when they're engaging with children is pausing with a mindfulness pause to say, what state is my nervous system in right now? So referring back to that chart, am I in the green zone? Am I in the red zone? Am I in purple or blue? And then does my state match the situation I'm in? So if I'm fully feeling mobilized, but all the child did was spill a little water, then my big upset reaction is not a match for the situation of a baby just spilling some water. And so when that happens, we need enough mindfulness in the pause to go, if not, if the nervous system state I'm in is not a match for this situation, then what practices do I have at my disposal to help me shift the state? So this is where we bring mindfulness as a basic form of awareness in a secular way to help create that pause between ourselves and our automatic unconscious reactions to the behaviors that we are observing with children that lead to co-escalation rather than co-regulation. And so what we find in our work is that in the research that the most immediate way to shift the balance of the nervous system when we're mobilized in that fight or flight sympathetic nerve, and to get us back and activating that vagus nerve and get back into that balance, increasing vagal tone is with the breath. So this becomes the scientific basis for voluntarily regulated breathing practices in our schools, but not just for the children. My point is that the first point is for the adults first. And so you'll see in this image here, a group of educators from San Bernardino City Unified School District on retreat with us, practicing the mind-body practices that support building their own nervous system capacity. And I'm so proud, not just in San Bernardino, but in almost every school district that we've partnered with this work, we've seen significant reductions in referrals to the office for disrespect and defiance, as well as in out-of-school suspensions by teachers who engage in this work and are building more capacity to see student behavior from a different lens. So it's really important when you think for yourself about the mind-body practices that you choose to support you, and I'm encouraging each and every one of you to continue to do the work to learn more. But one thing that I want to highlight here before I move on to the next point is that not all breaths are for calming. So please take a note on that, right? So many times I hear people thinking that I suck at mindfulness, I suck at breath work, it doesn't work for me, I can't calm down. And one thing that we understand is that sometimes the practice that we need to shift state is not a calming breath. And so a big part of what I'm educating adults to understand is determining whether a calming breath is most appropriate for helping you support your nervous system at that time, whether it might be a balancing breath that is kind of like a universal breath. So that at the end of our practice today, or at the end of our talk, I'm going to invite you to join me for a practice. And I'm going to share coherent breathing with you because it's like a universal balancing breath that can help you when you're in shutdown mode to help build some nervous system gas, or if you're in overwhelm, to help you put some brakes on to calm. And then finally, we have stimulating practices like ha breath or spinal twist. And these are practices that you can easily find online for the sake of time. But it's so important to understand that sometimes what we're dealing with is a low arousal state, particularly with people with ADHD. We think their bodies are moving too much, but actually there's a hypoarousal. So a breath like ha breath is a very powerful breath to stimulate and build alertness so that a person can focus. So our understanding of the science helps us look at children's behavior in a different way. So if I see a child that's needing to rock or move, I won't escalate their behavior by telling them to be still and sit down or to punish. I can understand perhaps that child's movement is a need for stimulating to wake up the nervous system so that they can focus and pay attention and give us the productivity that we're looking for. So that's where our understanding of the science becomes so important. And we'll touch at the end on a practice to share it with you. So pillar 2 in this work, once we have our settled nervous system state as a foundation, we move into supporting co-regulation for neurodiverse learners. Now, why is this so important? The research shows us that people with higher ACE scores, meaning people who have had significant trauma exposure, many people with autism diagnosis or ADHD are found with heart rate variability and heart rate studies and analysis, to have low vagal tone, which means the activity of their nervous system is not as strong as others. And when this is the case, if a person does have a lower vagal tone as a result of any of these diagnoses, it results in what we experience as a less flexible or more rigid nervous system. Now, this becomes so important because by nature of their physiology, so this is not willful misbehavior if a child is seeming rigid or less flexible, or if you're seeing a child having a meltdown because you told them, okay, it's going to be time to put our toys away in 10 minutes. But then you came back 2 minutes later and said, okay, let's go, Jerome. And Jerome has a full-on meltdown. Now we're thinking we have a behavior, but we're not taking into account that this child, if he has lower vagal tone as a result of his diagnoses, that it's my responsibility to understand how the environmental stressors are affecting his nervous system and his ability to regulate, how me changing the environment and the rules of engagement without giving him notice is stressing his nervous system, the uncertainty of things today being different than they were yesterday, right? So again, when we understand their nervous system, we understand how much more responsibility we have to create the conditions that support their nervous system rather than working against it. This in and of itself has been a big game changer for teachers, understanding how they set up the environment, as well as parents at home, to make sure that the environment itself and the routines and the rituals and the patterns and the expectancy of consistency is so important for helping settle the children's nervous systems. And again, that's not about discipline. It's about being proactive with their nervous system's needs in mind. So we understand that having a lower window of tolerance can make it take longer to recover from triggers because there's higher levels of cortisol and adrenaline in the body, right? And then again, we talked about the nervous system hypoarousal that has been found in people with ADHD. So that means the body is trying to move to build arousal, sensory seeking. And do we provide opportunities for that physical movement? Or are we constantly demanding sit still, be still for unhealthily and unnaturally long periods of time for children based on their developmental age? And sometimes it's not just based on their developmental age, because I teach teachers in my work. And I have teachers who go stand in the back of the room and prefer a standing desk or a rock and sway while I'm trying to teach. So what I always like to encourage you to remember is that what's true for children is true for adults. What kids need, adults need too, especially in this work when I have seen so many neurodivergent adults showing up in my trainings who are not aware of their own nervous system states, their own nervous system's needs, and how that can create a disconnect as they're trying to support children. So that awareness of self really goes a long way to fusing behaviors that will never even need to happen if we're in front of them. So our goal here is around co-regulation. So we're helping understand how our tone of voice, our facial gestures, our body posture, all of these nonverbals are sending messages to the child's nervous system about their state of relative safety with us. And so then it becomes important to understand that our nervous systems, the child's nervous system is constantly scanning our face, our tone of voice, our speech patterns, our gestures to know whether or not they're psychologically safe with us. So becoming very, very intentional about how we use vocal tone, eye contact, our physical posture, and our gestures. And then as it relates to bringing mind-body work into the schools, it's super, super important for us to problematize the word calm. And I like to always bring forward in my work this idea that calm does not equal regulated. This is a big issue in a lot of different ways for me. I'm just going to grab onto two for the sake of time in this moment. The first reason that I problematize the idea of calm being the goal for behavior in the classroom is because a child could be calm, appear calm and quiet, but they could be thoroughly in that shutdown survival state that we just looked at a little bit ago. They could be suicidal. They could be completely disconnected, but we're missing that because they're calm and we've assigned calm as the thing that we're looking for. Similarly, we can look at children who are busy, and this is also a big issue with culture because there are some cultures that might settle their nervous systems, closed eyes, quiet breath, crisscross applesauce. But there are other cultures, particularly indigenous cultures, where we co-regulate communally with drumming, with dancing, with singing, because vocalizing activates the vagus nerve. Dance activates the vagus nerve. Drumming discharges stress energy out of the body. All of these things are thoroughly in support, and the communal aspect of it all is all in support of regulating and settling a nervous system to be ready for learning. But if you as a principal or a teacher are coming into a classroom and you're only looking at for calm as a signaler of readiness to learn, then you will be problematizing the behavior of children who need movement to regulate their nervous system. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done. This is a teacher, a second grade teacher that I've worked with in Berryessa Union School District up in San Jose. And she took this work that we have covered, and you can see the little green bar that's underneath the children's picture. So every day the children come in and they know they've been taught everything we've just covered right now in second grade. And she's got a inclusion classroom with children on the spectrum, children with ADHD in this room. Every morning the children go in and pull out of that white envelope that you see hanging there. And it has their name on it, and they put it under the level that shows where their nervous system is. If they're in a state of feeling safe, if they're feeling mobilized, if they're feeling shut down. So all she has to do is look at that chart and she can see where the children's energy is in that moment. They've been trained to be able to notify her that. Then you can see she has a range of breath practices and body practices that are on Velcro stickies. At any time of the day, a child can know what kind of practice they need to help support their nervous system state. I need to shake. I need to discharge some energy. We want to drum. We want to do cat breath. We want a calming buddy. And they will take it from where you see it listed and they will move it over to the right and build a menu. And after the students who need support have put those things on under the menu, the teacher knows that the class can benefit as a whole, with herself included, in supporting the class in delivering the mind-body practice that they have stated that they need for their nervous system support at the time. And it's a beautiful experience to watch. So this is Isabel. This is a practice that the children have asked for. So on this day, they wanted to stand and they wanted to move with their hands. And she's delivering the exact practice that they requested. She didn't decide for them what they needed to co-regulate. as she participated in the practice with them. So this mind-body approach and the empowerment of neurodiverse learners to understand their own nervous system and to state their needs and to have those needs met in a communal way that is proactive and healing rather than reactionary and punitive is critical. Because I definitely want to put a point on before I get to my last point about what I observe as the weaponizing of mindfulness practices in schools. In many cases, when children are having strong behaviors, I've seen teachers go over there in that quiet corner and breathe. And when you get yourself back together, then you can come back and be with us. Well, now we've turned something that is incredibly healing of mindfulness, mind-body awareness, interoception, and breath work. We've weaponized it and turned it into a punishment that people reject. Versus in the case that you just observed in Isabel's classroom, it is a proactive practice that is for healing and connection and resetting that the entire class engages in together with the teacher also involved. So now I want to wrap up with you on this third pillar, which once we have our nervous system settled, we're able to create the conditions where we can co-regulate a learning community together in a classroom like Isabel's, where children on the spectrum, children with ADHD are learning right alongside their peers in a mainstream classroom. The third piece that makes it possible for that is our capacity to establish sensory-friendly environments. So many of us are not understanding how trauma and neurodiversity impacts our sensory system and the ways in which we experience the built environment around us. So most of us were raised being aware of 5 senses, but in our work with teachers, we help explore 8. So we have visual, auditory, olfactory is our sense of smell, gustatory is our sense of taste, tactile is our sense of touch. But here we also add awareness of the needs around vestibular, so that sense of balance, children who need to spin, children who like to hang upside down. So we know that spinning clockwise in the Northern Hemisphere activates the vagus nerve and helps create a sense of calm. But when we see children spinning, what do? We say stop. So in those cases, when we don't have this awareness, we're interrupting the child's innate ability to settle and activate and regulate their nervous system and activate the vagus nerve. And now again, we've co-escalated behaviors instead of co-regulated. Also proprioception, the awareness of my body in space, my muscles and my strength. So when children have low proprioception, they may crash into you with strong hugs or not be aware of where their body is in space. And again, having this awareness helps us distinguish willful misbehavior versus symptoms and needs based on a diagnosis and a sensory profile. And our behavior and the way we treat children changes dramatically based on that distinction. And then finally, interoception. And interoception is our awareness of our internal state. And for many children who are neurodiverse, as well as those who have been impacted by trauma, interoception can be a challenge, the ability to know, what am I feeling? Do I feel my body? I'm not aware of where my body is or where I am in space, or my sensations of hunger or thirst. And we know that interoception is one of the foundational skills, sensory abilities that's required as a part of emotional and behavioral regulation to know what state I'm in, which is the main thing that we're asking teachers. What am I feeling? What is it triggering in me? What capacity do I have to engage bounce back ability for optimal nervous system flexibility? So we know that many people who are neurodiverse struggle with either hypersensitivity, which is a overstimulation in a lot of environments, and others struggle with hyposensitivity, which is a reduced sensory stimuli, which makes them more sensory seeking. So in my work, we look at teachers' classroom environments. So I get the whole gamut of going into classrooms that look very underloved, where students might struggle with hypoarousal. So there's low nervous system access for stimulation in the environment, nothing visual, creative, stimulating in the space. all the way to environments like this that could look like a lot of fun. I'm sure the teacher put a lot of effort and energy into designing this beautiful space. We have natural light, we've got the tree. But we also know in this case that many of our neurodivergent learners are overstimulated with environments that have too much going on. And so in this work, we began to work with teachers in building their capacity to create what we call negative space in the learning environment, to create places for the eyes to rest and for the senses to not be so overwhelmed with so many things to look at. Most of us as teachers were taught, fill every inch of the walls with everything, and that clutter in and of itself can be leading to nervous system overstimulation for children and leading to behaviors that we then are challenged by, and then unfortunately many children are punished for without a question about what the environment itself has contributed to the child's challenges with behavior regulation, nervous system regulation. So in our work, we did some research to explore how the autistic eye experiences learning spaces. And some of the research we found was that informed us that for some people on the spectrum, they're able to see the flickering and fluorescent lighting, and that can be a source of hyperstimulation in the nervous system. And so with that in mind, some of our teachers have started covering some of the fluorescent lighting if that isn't possible to change, and noticing more of a nervous system settling of children who are very visually overstimulated in that way. We also did some other research and around colors, because we know that the colors that are used in our typical classrooms are very sympathetic. So they're the reds and the yellows, those primary colors activate the sympathetic nervous system. And we bumped into some research that suggested that the autistic eye most preferred is one of the studies, grays, gray blues, and gray greens. So things that have and more analogs to nature. And we also find that for neurodiverse learners, but I think all people would benefit. You see elements of nature here in the classroom with the small plants. We see optional seating, places where students could sit together if they wanted to be in groups. Then you also see in this image places where a student could choose to work alone up closer to the chalkboard without it being punitive to work alone, that it's a choice to move into a space. We see flexible seating on the floor, and we have in our classroom standing desk as an option. You see the little green wiggler for students that need to bounce, and you see the blue spinner over here on the left for students that need to spin. And we make it all a part of an inclusive learning environment where people can choose. And in our work, when I was at the University of Laverne, we built a classroom like this, but for teachers, right? So I trained teachers earning master's degrees in special education. They would rush to class to be there early to pick the flexible seating choice that best worked for them. So again, I know what's true for children is true for adults. So it becomes so important from a neuro-inclusive perspective to understand how trauma as well as neurodiversity impacts our sensory system, because sometimes we're working with children with an assumption of neurodivergence, but what really needs to be treated is the trauma. So if that's something that interests you, I encourage you to look at the work of Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris and watch her TED Talk on trauma. It's super important to understand that sometimes the gross motor delays, lack of body awareness, the sensory over-arousal can be a function of those diagnoses. And so we're not just treating neurodivergence, we also are needing support and therapies that support the impacts of the trauma as well, because sometimes for some people, those diagnoses start to overlap and we could be missing the deeper foundational level of what the children really need. So very briefly, I just want to explain that as you're designing classroom learning spaces, home spaces, community-based learning spaces, begin to think about how the design you've selected is impacting the nervous system. So things that stimulate the sympathetic nervous system to get me ready to go, 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 or all the way toward feeling overstimulated. Reds and yellows are primary colors, fluorescent lighting, overcrowding, sharp edges, and chronic noise exposure. So we know many of our neurodivergent learners are very overstimulated when there's a lot of noise or a lot of echo. Things that calm and activate the parasympathetic or the vagus nerve, the purple, blues, and greens, more natural lighting, more spaciousness, at least about a wingspan distance away on all sides of personal space whenever possible. Smooth and circular edges, as well as elements of nature. So many of my teachers have worked with their children to bring in plants. Not everyone can bring in animals, but water features and different things that bring those nature elements. Now here, we're not asking you to go all the way to parasympathetic because we're not at a spa, right? We're in a classroom. So we don't want to go all the way sympathetic with overstimulation. So the goal is to create a balance of these sympathetic features that get us alert and ready to go and excited, blended with these parasympathetic features that soothe the nervous system and help us relax and settle. So our goal isn't calm, it's creating environments where students can have a state of what we refer to as alert relaxation. So I'm alert and I'm ready to go and learn in this space, but the features of the environment allow my nervous system to settle enough so that vagus nerve is activated and I'm able to focus. So here's a few examples again in Isabel's classroom. This young man is sitting on a spinning chair and the rest of the class is to the right and facing toward the teacher on the floor. But he has the option to sit in that flexible seat, to wobble, to rock, and to spin. He's fully alert in this moment. He's able to respond and answer questions. But in many cases, teachers would say, no, children will not use this properly. They'll take advantage of it. And in those cases, they're escalating the behaviors when a child is being required to sit for long periods of time that is not working for their nervous system. So this has been a great inclusive practice that's allowing her out of class referral for behavior to go to 0. So here's Sandhya. She's also in Berryessa Union in San Jose. She teaches an autism class, middle school. And after learning this work, she was given permission to bring this tent into the classroom for children to name when they felt overstimulated by the sensory elements of the environment, to go in there to reset. They can set an alarm for 5 minutes. They say how long they need. They go in, they reset, they're able to come back out and resume with their work. And similarly, in her case as well, she found that by the end of the year of implementing this with the students understanding what it's for, they're not taking advantage of it, they're not using it to get out of work, they understand that it's there to support their nervous system state. And again, she has gone down 90% in her need to bring in external supports for behaviors, emotional control support. So we're very, very proud of what's possible when we bring these features into play. And I do have hope for this ability to create these neuro-inclusive spaces, not just in classrooms, but in the community as a whole. Because we know that so many families like mine who have children who are hypersensitive due to their diagnoses miss out on things like Disneyland or other places that are highly stimulated. In this case, I was at a Padres game last Mother's Day with my family in San Diego. And the San Diego Padres baseball stadium was the first in the nation to have these sensory activation vehicles where a family or individual could come out without having to fully leave the game because somebody's melting down. They could just go step outside into the outer area of the ballpark and go inside of this sensory vehicle, settle for a while, and maybe go back. And now the whole family can continue to enjoy the rest of the baseball game. Right? Because it's so important, because you have neurotypical members of the family that feel resentful when we always have to leave because they can't handle it and he can't behave and she can't make it. And now this one effort toward social inclusion makes it possible for a family to bond and to enjoy life out in the world together in ways that are meaningful to them, because we take the time to create proactive behavior and nervous system supports for the members of our community who need it. So from here, I would like to just for a moment share with you again, these are just minor ways that we can support the sensory system for students. for children at home. And more importantly, I believe, ask them. I think that children are very good at letting us know what they need if we observe them without a lens for we shouldn't be allowing that. And then, of course, there are boundaries and we do need to enforce states of safety. But I have found that every time, again, as young as second grade, when we've explained the brain and the nervous system to second graders, they've become able over a period of weeks to get in tune with what they're experiencing, what they need, and what to ask for to shorten the frequency, the severity, and the duration of the type of stressors that lead to the meltdown behaviors that we're trying to avoid. And finally, in this picture, I just want to share with you, this was a drumming circle that we had in San Diego last fall. A group of children came and led all of the educators and psychologists and social workers who were in our training in a drumming lesson. And what they wanted, and what I'm leaving for you as a message here, they said, please, Dr. Niki, tell the adults to put the co back in co-regulation. I love it. And what they meant was very specific. We keep thinking that it's our job to be the expert and it's a one-way transmission, a one-way push. I've got the knowledge, I've got the expertise, I know what you need, I'm going to tell you, you do what I say, right? So we want to regulate their behaviors. How do I regulate children? Well, we don't regulate, we co-regulate. But what they meant by saying put the co back in co-regulation was, please recognize that we have nervous systems that can bless you. Even with our diagnosis, even with the behaviors you're concerned about, even with our present levels of achievement, if you allow us, we can connect with you in ways that heal your nervous system. You connect with ways that heal our nervous system. And it's that heart-centered connection that allows an exchange and flow of energy between us to create learning environments and living environments where we all thrive. And so in this image, those children led us in a drumming lesson and in a drumming circle. We built one rhythm to build one heart, one mind, one collective nervous system on one rhythm. And that is what I believe our neurodivergent babies, as beautiful as they are offering us. They're offering us a lens to another way to experience connection and engagement. And they're inviting us to step into our own healing power and process as much as we are asking that of them. And so I'd like to stop right there because you've been sitting and listening to me for a while. And I want to leave you with a few minutes of a mind-body practice, if you're willing to stand up and join me. And then when I'm done with that, I will offer you 10 minutes of Q&A to connect. I would love to get to know some of you. All right. So if you're interested in what I have to offer right now, I'll invite you to join me standing. And I want to thank Sid for this cool t-shirt. All right. So we talked about why some people have challenges with mind-body practices. You feel like mindfulness isn't good for me. I'm not able to relax. Breath work doesn't work for me. I feel more anxious. And a big part of why is because we have not all been taught to put a discharge practice or an energy release practice before we try to do a calming breath work. Now, so I'm going to show you Ha breath. And the reason I love this one is because I learned in my training of Breath, Body, Mind with Dr. Brown and Gerbar, certified in trauma-informed breath work. Ha breath, he prescribes it as a psychiatrist to people who have ADHD. So it's kind of a holistic treatment package because ADHD is signified by low arousal, so a low lethargic kind of nervous system state. And Ha breath does two things. It'll help you become more alert and kind of put some gas in the nervous system to focus. And it also helps you push out strong emotional energy that's pent up. All right. So if you want to try Ha breath with me, a full round would be 15 times, but I'm going to invite us just to do about 10 of them so that we can have time for both practices that I want to share. So our feet are just over hip width apart. Our knees are slightly bent down, so slightly come down, but keep your spine straight. The palms are outstretched like so. When you breathe in, it's like you're pulling a 40-pound row at the gym. So breathing in and breathing out. So it's a big, powerful breath out on the ha. All right. So again, I'm going to face you now. Feet are hip width apart, knees slightly bent, spine stays straight, palms outstretched. Breathe it in through the nose. Breathe out. Palms up and breathe. Palms up and breathe. And breathe. Halfway there with this and breathe. 5 more and breathe. And breathe. And breathe. 2 more and breathe. And last time, breathe. Then bringing your feet back to starting posture. Your feet are hip width apart, arms are down by your side. Take a moment to either let your eyes gaze softly down at the floor or let them close if that feels comfortable. We're going to practice interoception. So see if you can take your attention and place it in the back of your throat. See if you can become aware of the vibration of the ha sound in the back of your throat. And then moving that awareness to the palms of your hands and fingertips. Can you notice what the energy or sensation feels like there? Perhaps there's a numbness there, whatever it is, be observing without judgment. Just notice. And then bringing the attention to the space between your shoulder blades. And if you notice a tension there, can you see what's possible if you would soften the energy between the shoulder blades? When you're ready, take a deep breath in through the nose. And breathe out, open mouth sigh. So what we just did was, again, the practice is called ha breath, but what we did that helps shift energy is the combination of breath plus movement plus sound. So for many people who feel like just sitting crisscross applesauce with your eyes closed and breathing doesn't do it for you, there's so many mind-body practices for supporting nervous system regulation, just like we did. That was vigorous. That didn't look calm, but we were moving nervous system states. So some of you might have been sleepy because you got me last at the end of a long conference, you're ready to sleep. You might have noticed a little bit of invigorating energy from that. And that would be the point of using that either as a discharge practice or as a stimulating breathing practice when you need nervous system arousal. So one more practice, I'd like to share with you the pace of coherent breathing. And we'll just do it standing right now for the sake of time. So with your palms cupped under the hands, you're going to breathe through the nose, and we're going to breathe in for a count of 4, pushing the arms up to push up the ceiling. And then we'll breathe out for a count of 4 and bring the arms back around. All right, and then I'll show you a different way to do it as well. So let's empty the lungs. Exhale, empty the lungs. Everything is through the breath, closing the mouth. To my count, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and breathing out, 2, 3, 4. Again, breath in, 2, 3, 4, and breathing out, 2, 3, 4. You could even reverse, breath in, 2, 3, 4. Bring it down the middle, breathing out, 2, 3, 4. One more time this way, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and breathing out, 2, 3, 4. Some of my babies like coherent hugs, so we do it this way, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, stretching out, and then breathing out, 2, 3, 4, and squeeze, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and breathing out, 2, 3, 4. Take a deep breath in, reach up, stretch up, reach for the ceiling, squeeze your ears and hold your breath. Breathe out a big ah. Now I'll invite you to your seats. So I encourage you to learn more about coherent breathing, particularly for adult nervous system regulation as a breath work practice. That pace we just moved at invited us to slow our breath down to 5 breaths per minute, which science is showing is the optimal rate, 5 to 6 breaths per minute, for over time being able to stabilize and reset our nervous systems. And this is the primary practice that I invite you to consider for yourself in building the nervous system capacity and the nervous system flexibility we need to lead neuro-inclusive spaces and to support the children who need us most. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention. I know that was a lot of information, but I love every opportunity to get this word out so that we can do better for all of our children and keeping them in community with us. And with that, Megan, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Niki. Our team chat, I want you to know, has been blowing up. We feel like here we are putting on a conference, and yet we've received so much from this session and our other sessions. And I feel like I need a Dr. Niki Elliot video for the end of every day. I think I would be a much nicer, calmer, regulated person. So just thank you. This was an excellent way to close our conference. We do have several questions, so I don't know that we'll get to all of them. But one of the questions that we have, thinking about your work with educators and that the heart-centered connection is a really different approach than how educators were taught, like classroom management. And so beyond watching you on repeat after we post the recording of this, do you have any other recommendations for how teachers can start on this journey to improve their practices and better serve our students?
So I would say there are others. There's when I first started this work, I was really kind of the only person. I felt like I was on an island. But I really want to elevate the work of Dr. Laurie Desautels. It's Desautels. She has an awesome book that just came out. It's not in my space right now in my office, but it's called Brain and Body Brilliance. She has another book called Connections Over Compliance. And so she's also rooted in this nervous system approach that we both work with the Polyvagal Institute with the work from Dr. Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory. So I think there is an emerging cadre of educators who are interpreting the polyvagal theory and applied education neuroscience into ways that are actionable for teachers. But she has some great work going on at Butler University, and she is another awesome resource for that. And I think what I have seen is that you seem silly at first, like that doesn't work, or you're being too nice to the kids and they shouldn't have those spinning chairs. But people notice when behaviors that they used to see in children, or the children who were constantly being sent to the office, or the children who, people were cherry picking and not wanting to choose those children for their classrooms. And then they see them with you and now they're behaving. And that's been the greatest testimony of this work, when teachers who are not believers start to say, wait, what are you doing? How's that child doing that? And now the door is open for them to be willing to hear a different story of connection. It's one nervous system at a time. That's all I can tell you, Megan.
That has been a theme of today, individualizing and one person at a time. I think that's truly the I in the IEP that has sometimes been lost in our practices. I'm wondering, I'm a former educator myself, and my Instagram feed is always filled with stuff that's like, stop telling me to do self-care. Like, I'm in burnout as a teacher. So what shifts could like site leaders and district administrators possibly make to prioritize this idea of co-regulation, right? And learning more about the nervous system?
So I bumped into a superintendent last Friday. I delivered a keynote for all the superintendents in San Diego County, and one of them was really vibing with what I was sharing, similar content to today. And he said, I recognize it's my job as a leader of a district, whether you're the leader of the district or the school, to, again, make wellness a communal affair, not an individual thing. And I truly believe, and especially for the educators who serve in high impact neighborhoods and communities, as well as children with high needs, the cost of recovery from the demands of those roles should in some ways be baked into the job, right? So he has created game days for staff district-wide. So again, we know laughter activates the vagus nerve, hugs and touch. And he's really recognizing in the increase in the number of teachers who live alone. So they're working all day and they're working in high stress roles, and then they're going home alone, and not everyone may have a pet. So they're not getting the nervous system refill that they need to have more nervous system capacity when they come back to work. And then we're getting the higher burnout and attrition. So he's actively building community practices, not just breath work. It's not the only thing, but when you make it a community engagement that's fun and that everyone is there and that he himself shows up for, Megan, right? So he's saying it's for all of us. It's not just for you to go fix yourself, as long as you are ready on Monday for whatever this job demands of you. So we have to create communal cultures of wellness that are built into the work.
I love that. I'm going to be reflecting a lot on that, the communal cultures of reflection, and wellness. I think that's really incredibly powerful and not something we do in education. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I want to give you a shout out. So you have a shout out in the Q&A feature that came from an attendee, Erica Gomez, who wants you to know that she did your Neurodiversity Partnership Program that you did with Santa Barbara County, or Santa Barbara Unified, I think.
Awesome.
And that she still utilizes all of the tools and the training, and that you've helped her become the educator she is today. So congratulations. We need those props on a Friday afternoon.
I take it. I love what I do. I feel like every educator that has that sentiment is like the teacher my child deserved, and the teacher that every child with a diagnosis deserves. And I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and thank you. I think we're seeing here too in the chat, like this is such a, your presence here today is such a gift to all of us, because wellness and understanding mind-body connections and truly understanding neuroscience, like it has evolved so much in recent years, that for those of us who are more veteran in our field, like this isn't something we were ever taught. And so I'm going back in my head right now and thinking of all my former students, and how we would have approached things differently. And so thank you for providing us this opportunity to learn forward.
You're welcome. And that happens a lot, Megan, if I may.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon in our trainings that people are very tearful and very emotional when we come into face-to-face with the science. And we did, I would just say there's BK and AK. There's before you knew and there's after you know, yeah, but there is that grieving period. I had it myself of what would I have done differently from the beginning of my parenting or the beginning of my work as a 4th and 5th grade teacher if this science had been taught to me in my teacher training program. So as long as we show up in our careers, there's time to repair and to keep on growing in ways that serve children. I believe that.
So on that line, our final question for tonight is, what is your advice for adults who may be hesitant to implement this practice, because of perhaps a bad experience in their past.
Which practice would you be referring to?
Like breathwork practice, or I would actually refer to redesigning our classroom environments and not wanting to tear any of our beautiful things down.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the breathwork practice side, I would say I work a lot with teachers who were exposed to things that were not trauma informed. So it's very important. So the credentials that I have for working with yoga, with breath work, are trauma informed, because there are certain breath practices that are not safe for certain conditions. Like even high breath, if I were to go farther than what I did with you all, I would have to give a disclaimer about epilepsy and bipolar conditions for that practice, to be very vigorous with it. And people, I would say, try it again if you feel it could benefit you in the care of someone who has trauma-informed practices. And if not, then don't, And then as far as it relates to like religious objections to engaging in mindfulness or breath work, whenever I'm teaching the science of every single thing that we're doing so that people understand that there's a science behind what's happening with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Even when I tell people, I'm raised Catholic, and it was interesting when I found out that the pace of the Hail Mary, when you pray the rosary, is paced to coherent breathing, is paced to 5 breaths per minute. So many religions have embedded the things that would heal the body and the nervous system into the rituals that we're not even aware of. And so we have objections to participating in things that, unbeknownst to us, are built in to cultural and religious practices. So when I explain the science of that, I've seen tremendous willingness of people who were otherwise hesitant to give things a try and then see how it landed in their body and then make their own informed decisions from that about what could support them. And then as far as the classroom, that is a grieving period because teachers are very attached. And so when I go in and coach teachers, I'm asking them, how are the children's nervous system experiencing this environment? So the first thing I do is I will bring you a Q-tip, Megan. And when I hand you a Q-tip, when I come in your classroom, that Q-tip will remind you to quit taking it personally. Right? Your designs are beautiful. I know you've done a lot, but this is how nervous systems could be affected by what's here. So what could change, because our goal is not to showcase how awesome we are as an interior designer, but to create neuro-inclusive environments where nervous systems can settle and thrive. So when we do it from that perspective, teachers slowly become willing to create some negative space, to remove a lot of the cluttering, to de-emphasize and decenter their Lakeshore special classroom, and to really allow it to emerge organically from the work that's being generated, and even inviting student voice into what's being put up and decorating in the community space. And the behavior adjusts. Behavior reflects that environment. It does.
Yes. Well, I so appreciate our time with you. And I in the chat here we have BKAK, Q-tip. Like we're gonna have lots of Dr. Niki Elliot isms to help us along this journey. And looking forward to continuing to learn with you because I think you're really innovative, which speaks to the work that Kevin is going to close us out with. So thank you very much, Dr. Niki Elliot.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your listening.
Thank you again, Dr. Niki, truly, for helping all of us make a mind-body connection to the heart of our work, and for reminding us that breath and stillness are powerful tools in the service of students. Thank you for elevating what a keynote can be and feel like through your grounding presence and interactive activities. Wow, that was an incredible amount of learning and connecting over the last 2 days. It's hard to believe that this was the final session of the 4th annual SIP Inclusion Conference. Now is the time to transform what you have experienced into environments of love and belonging for all students. The Supporting Innovative Practices team extends our deepest gratitude to every presenter and exhibitor for your preparation, passion, and presence. A heartfelt thank you to the Languagers team for providing Spanish translation and ASL interpretation in every session, ensuring this conference reflected our values of access, equity, and inclusion. And to our amazing tech partners, VFairs and Tim Northern of the El Dorado County Office of Education Communications team, thank you for working in seamless collaboration to deliver a powerful and accessible virtual experience. The final thank you goes to you, our attendees. Whether you're a family member, a classroom teacher, a paraeducator, a school leader, or a system-wide administrator, your voice is essential in creating the inclusion symphony beat by beat. If you are the conductors of change in transforming our schools into spaces where every student, especially those most often excluded, experiences not just access, but true belonging. Inclusion is not a checklist, as we know. It is a movement toward justice, toward rightful presence. It requires that we actively confront ableism in our educational systems and rebuild them so that all students are seen, valued, and celebrated for who they are, not who we think they should be. Your leadership and your practices are exactly what someone needs to witness, to believe that this kind of education is not only possible, it is necessary. Your engagement in this year's conference has been off the charts. If you're among the top 10 on our leaderboard, keep an eye out for an email next week with details about selecting your conference prize. Thank you for visiting our exhibition booths, taking selfies in the photo booth, and fully showing up for each session. Before we officially close, a quick reminder. You can still view The Ride Ahead by Dan and Samuel Habib until 11:59 p.m. tonight. Don't miss the chance to witness their powerful story. We've dropped the conference survey link in the chat. Please take a moment and share your feedback. It shapes our future conferences. Plus, by completing it, you'll receive a SIP t-shirt just like Dr. Niki's. To wrap up today's learning, we want to leave you with a short but powerful message from El Dorado County Office of Education Superintendent Ed Manansala. Until next year, keep leading with courage, inclusion, and love. Let's get this job done together. Have an amazing and restful weekend.